A glass of champagne shatters on the marble floor. In a ballroom dripping with diamonds and ambition, Ella Thorne stands frozen, her haute couture gown ripped at the shoulder. Her own husband, millionaire tech mogul Matteo Thorne, sneers at her. "You're nothing." He spits his voice, cutting through the silence. "You are a charity case I dressed up." He thinks she's a penniless nobody he plucked from obscurity. He thinks this gala held at the prestigious Sterling Crest Grand is his triumph. What he doesn't know is that the name on the building, the name on the bank that holds his loans, and the name of the woman he just humiliated are all the same. The zipper on Ella's gown was cold against her skin. It was a custom-made Dior, the color of a midnight sky, and it felt less like a dress and more like armor. In the penthouse suite of their glass-walled apartment overlooking Central Park, she was preparing for battle. Her husband Matteo Thorne called it his big night. Ella called it Tuesday. "Are you ready yet?" Matteo barked from the living room. He didn't wait for an answer. He appeared in the doorway of the sprawling walk-in closet, already encased in a tuxedo that seemed too tight for his ego. He was adjusting his cufflinks, a pair of obnoxious gold nuggets. "We're late. My investors are already there." "I'll be right out, Matteo," Ella said, her voice soft, practiced. It was the voice she used to avoid a fight. Matteo looked her up and down, his eyes lingering not with desire, but with a cold, assessing gaze. "That's the dress, the Dior good. At least you'll look the part. I swear, Ella, sometimes I wonder if you remember how to dress yourself. I can't have you looking like you did before you met me." Ella's fingers tightened on the velvet box in her hand. Before him, she was Ella Harrison. She wore flannel and jeans. She read medieval literature at a quiet university, and she was happy. But the Harrison name was old, quiet, and discreet. It was old money, so old it had stopped trying to look like money at all. Matteo Thorne was the opposite. He was new money, loud, insecure, and desperate for validation. He had made a fast fortune in speculative real estate and tech startups, and he thought his marriage to Ella with her quiet grace and what he perceived as a respectable but poor lineage gave him the one thing his millions couldn't buy class. He had no idea. "The earrings, Ella. Put them on," he commanded, gesturing to the box. She opened it. Inside, a pair of heavy diamond chandeliers glittered. They were a gift from him. They felt like handcuffs. She put them on the weight, pulling at her lobes. "There," he said, nodding in satisfaction. "Now you look like a millionaire's wife. Try not to embarrass me tonight. This launch is everything. We're celebrating the Thorne Tower deal." The drive to the Sterling Crest Grand was tense. Matteo was on his phone, yelling at a subordinate. "I don't care what the zoning board said. You make it happen, or you're cleaning toilets on Monday. Got it?" Ella looked out the window. The Sterling Crest Grand was the crown jewel of Manhattan. A historic landmark, it was the definition of timeless luxury. Matteo had all but bankrupted himself to secure its grand ballroom, for his party a celebration of his new partnership to build the Thorne Tower. He thought hosting his event there proved he had arrived. As they pulled up the doorman, a man named Thomas, who had been there for 40 years, rushed to Ella's side, bypassing Matteo completely. "Good evening, Miss Ella." Thomas said, his voice a warm, familiar rumble. He offered her a hand. "Thomas, it's so good to see you." Ella smiled a real smile. "How is your daughter's violin recital?" "She was first chair, thanks to you, ma'am," he said, his eyes crinkling. Matteo shoved past them. "Hey, chauffeur, watch the paint. And you," he snapped at Thomas, "do your job and get the door for me. The guest of honor." Thomas's smile vanished. He gave Matteo a look of pure, unadulterated ice. "Sir." Matteo, oblivious, strutted into the lobby, a sea of marble and gold. He was immediately rude to the concierge, demanding to know why his Thorn Industries logo wasn't bigger on the digital display. Ella paused to murmur to Thomas, "I'm so sorry, Thomas. He's nervous." Thomas just shook his head slightly. "You don't have to apologize for him, Ms. Ella. Not here. Not ever. Your father is aware of the situation." Ella's blood ran cold. He's been watching. We all have." Thomas straightened his uniform. "Enjoy your evening, ma'am, or at least endure it. It'll be over soon." A shiver went down Ella's spine. She knew her father, Arthur Harrison, was a protective man, but she hadn't realized he had his entire network mobilized. The Sterling Crest Group was more than just a hotel chain. It was the public face of Harrison Holdings, a vast, silent empire of banking, logistics, and real estate. An empire that Matteo Thorn was trying to play in not realizing he was a pawn on their board. As she entered the ballroom, she spotted Matteo fawning over Jacob Hayes, a rival developer known for his cutthroat tactics. Standing next to Jacob was Chloe Vance, a reporter for the Wall Street Journal, known for her brutal Take No Prisoners articles. And then Ella saw her. Serafina Sterling. No relation to the hotel, but a socialite with a surgically perfected face and a reputation for collecting wealthy married men. Matteo had been careless, leaving texts open on his phone. Ella knew exactly who Serafina was. Serafina saw Ella and gave her a slow, insulting smirk. She glided over to Matteo, placing a hand on his arm that lingered far too long. "Matteo, darling," she purred, "your party is adequate." Matteo beamed, preening under her touch. "Only the best, Serafina. You know me." He didn't even introduce his wife. He just turned his back on Ella, laughing at something Serafina whispered in his ear. Ella stood alone in the center of the room, a glass of untouched champagne in her hand, the Dior gown her only defense. The humiliation was a physical ache. It was just beginning. The ballroom was a cacophony of feigned compliments and thinly veiled ambition. Matteo, emboldened by champagne and the fawning attention of Serafina, was at his absolute worst. He was holding court near the stage, loudly bragging about the Thorn Tower project. "It's going to be the biggest thing this city has seen in 50 years, Matteo declared, his voice slurring slightly. "Taller than anything the old money dinosaurs ever built." Jacob Hayes, the rival developer, raised a skeptical eyebrow. "It's an ambitious project, Thorn. The permits alone must be a nightmare. And your primary funding. It's all leveraged, isn't it? One hiccup in the supply chain and you're belly up." Matteo's face flushed with anger. He hated being questioned. "I have no supply chain issues. My logistics are ironclad, and my funding is secured." He spotted Ella standing nearby, speaking quietly with Mr. Albright, the hotel's general manager. Albright was an institution, a man who had served kings and presidents with unflappable grace. He looked deeply concerned by whatever Ella was saying. "Ella!" Matteo bellowed, silencing the entire room. Every head turned. Ella froze. Mr. Albright gave her a small, supportive nod before melting back into the shadows. Get over here, Matteo commanded, gesturing impatiently. Ella felt the familiar cold dread wash over her. With hundreds of eyes on her, she walked the long, lonely path across the ballroom floor. She could feel Serafina's mocking gaze. She could see Chloe Vance, the reporter, subtly lift her phone, the red light of its camera app blinking. "Yes, Matteo," Ella said, keeping her voice even. "My friend's here," he said, draping a heavy arm around her shoulders. "Are worried about my logistics. You're my wife. Tell them how supported I am." He was squeezing her shoulder, his fingers digging in. It wasn't a hug. It was a threat. I'm not sure what you mean, Matteo," Ella stammered. "I don't handle the logistics for Thorn Industries." Matteo laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Of course you don't. You don't handle anything. That's the point. My wife, ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the crowd, "is my greatest asset. She proves that you don't need a brain to succeed. You just need to be smart enough to marry one." A few people tittered nervously. Jacob Hayes looked disgusted. "Matteo, please," Ella whispered, trying to pull away. This only enraged him. He saw her retraction as defiance. "What's wrong, Ella? Am I wrong? Tell me, what did you do before me? Weren't you, I don't know, cataloguing dusty old books in some run-down library for pennies? Your family name might be Harrison, but they're as poor as church mice. You're a charity case, Ella, a charity case that I dressed up in Dior." Serafina let out a high-pitched, cruel laugh. "He's right, darling. The dress is wasted on you." Ella's face was burning. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. She wouldn't. "You're drunk, Matteo," she said, her voice shaking, but clear. "Let's go home." "Home," he roared. "The party just started." "My party? You don't tell me when to go home. You don't tell me anything." And then he did the unforgivable. Serafina, sensing her moment, glided up. "She's just stressed, Matteo. Maybe she needs a drink." "Oh, wait," she said, looking at Ella's dress. "This is so last season. I saw it on a sale rack." "You're right," Matteo sneered. He grabbed Serafina's full glass of champagne. "She needs to lighten up. And this dress, it's just a little much." He poured the entire glass of champagne slowly down the front of Ella's gown. The room gasped. The music stopped. The only sound was the drip, drip, drip of champagne on the pristine marble floor. Ella was soaked. The sticky liquid clung to her, cold and violating. "Oh dear," Serafina fake gasped, covering her mouth. "What a waste of good champagne." Matteo grinned, looking around for approval. "What? It's just a dress. I'll buy her 10 more. Go clean yourself up, Ella. You're a mess. You're embarrassing me." Ella looked at him. She looked at the man she had once long ago mistaken for charming. She saw the petty, insecure, cruel little man he truly was. And in that moment, the fear and the patience and the strategy all evaporated, replaced by a pure, cold stillness. She didn't cry. She didn't move. She just stared at him. "You're right, Matteo," she said, her voice terrifyingly quiet. "I am a mess, and I am embarrassing you." She turned to Serafina. "And you. You're wearing a Patek Philippe watch." Serafina touched her wrist, preening. It's the new Aquanaut. A gift, of course. It's a fake," Ella said, her voice cutting through the silence. "The bezel on the Aquanaut has 48 diamonds. Yours has 46. And the sweep of the second hand is a quartz tick not an automatic sweep. It's a cheap Chinese knockoff. Just like you." Serafina's face went white with rage. Before Matteo could react, Ella turned and walked not to the restroom, but straight toward the grand ballroom doors. She walked with her head high, soaked in champagne, the entire room watching her. Matteo, furious at being defied, grabbed her arm. "Where the hell do you think you're going? I'm not done with you." He spun her around. His hand was raised, and for a terrifying second the entire room thought he was going to strike her. Ella didn't even flinch. "Get your hand off me, Matteo." "Or what?" he spat. "Your leave go back to your dusty, penniless family. You're nothing without me." "Let go," Ella said, enunciating each word. "Make me," he challenged. "Very well." Ella looked over his shoulder, her eyes finding Mr. Albright, who was standing by the door with 2 large uniformed security guards. She didn't shout. She didn't have to. She just gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. In an instant, the 2 guards were on Matteo. "Sir, take your hand off the lady," one of them said, his voice a low growl. "Who the hell are you?" Matteo yelled. "I rented this ballroom. You work for me tonight. Get your hands off me." "No, Mr. Thorne," Mr. Albright said, stepping forward, his face a mask of polite, professional fury. "We don't work for you. We work for the Sterling Crest Group, and you, sir, are no longer a welcome guest. You're firing me from my own party." Matteo laughed, but it was a nervous sound. "You can't. I'll have your job. I'll buy this entire rundown hotel and turn it into a parking lot." Ella finally pulled her arm free. She looked at Mr. Albright. "It's time, Mr. Albright," she said. "Yes, ma'am," he replied. "The Red Lounge is prepared for you, and your father is on his way." Matteo's smug grin faltered. "Father? What father?" "Her father is a nobody." Ella smoothed her wet dress. "You're about to make a very, very big mistake, Matteo. But please, continue." "Get out!" Matteo screamed at the guards. "All of you, this is my night." The ballroom doors burst open, but it wasn't more security. It was a group of men in sharp, dark suits. They moved with an unnerving, silent efficiency. In the center of them was a man Ella hadn't seen in 6 months, though she spoke to him every day. He was tall, silver-haired, and wore a simple, impeccably tailored suit that probably cost more than Matteo's car. He exuded an aura of absolute, unassailable power. He looked at Ella, his eyes softening with paternal rage at her disheveled state. Then his gaze fell on Matteo Thorne, and his eyes turned to chips of ice. "Dad?" Ella said, her voice breaking for the first time, a single tear of relief tracing a path through the sticky champagne. Arthur Harrison, chairman of Harrison Holdings and owner of the entire Sterling Crest Group, had just arrived at the party. The entire ballroom seemed to hold its collective breath. The air crackled the silence so profound that the clinking of ice in a distant glass sounded like a gunshot. Matteo Thorne stared at the newcomer. He recognized the face. He'd seen it in the Financial Times in Forbes, but he couldn't place it. His champagne-addled brain was struggling to connect the dots. "Who the hell is this?" Matteo blustered, trying to reclaim his authority. "Security! Get this old man out of my party." The security guards didn't move. They, like every other employee in the building, knew exactly who Arthur Harrison was. They reported to Mr. Albright, who reported to the regional board, who reported directly to the man standing in the doorway. Arthur Harrison ignored Matteo completely. His eyes were fixed only on his daughter. He walked forward, his legal team parting like the sea to let him through. He reached Ella and gently, with a monogrammed silk handkerchief from his breast pocket, wiped the tear from her cheek. He poured champagne on me. Dad? Ella whispered the dam of her composure, finally breaking. Arthur's jaw tightened. He slipped off his own $1,000 suit jacket, a bespoke brioni, and draped it over her soaked shoulders. It enveloped her a shield of power and love. I know, Ella. I saw, he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. He turned his head just slightly to Mr. Albright. Get her to the penthouse suite. Not his, he added with disgust. Ours. The presidential. And call Dr. Evans. Have him check on her. Yes, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Albright gestured, and 2 female staff members, who had appeared as if from nowhere, flanked Ella. No! Matteo suddenly yelled, the pieces clicking in his head with a sickening thud. Wait, Harrison Arthur Harrison, as in Harrison Holdings. He looked from the imposing man to his wife, who was now wrapped in the man's coat. Ella Harrison. His wife. No! No, no, no! Matteo stammered, backing away. You're her father, but she's... You're poor. Arthur Harrison actually smiled. It was a terrifying sight. It held no humor, only a chilling, predatory calm. Mr. Thorne, Arthur said, his voice as smooth and cold as the marble floor. My family has owned the land this city is built on since it was a Dutch colony. We don't look rich. We are rich. We're the people you borrow money from. Matteo's blood ran cold. Borrowed money. Chloe Vance, the reporter, was now recording openly, her eyes wide with the realization that this was the story of the decade. Mr. Harrison, she called out, is it true your daughter is married to Matteo Thorne? Arthur turned his gaze to her. My daughter was married to Matteo Thorne. As of tonight, that arrangement is terminated. You can't do that, Matteo shrieked, his voice high with panic. We're married. What's mine is hers. What's hers is mine. Ella, tell him we're a team. Ella, pausing at the door, turned around. The fear was gone. Her eyes were as cold as her father's. You said it yourself, Matteo, she said. I'm a charity case. I have nothing. It's all yours. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. Or so you thought. From the back of Arthur's legal team, a sharp woman in a pantsuit stepped forward. It was Catherine Shaw Harrison Holdings, chief legal counsel. Mr. Thorne, Catherine said, her voice crisp. I'm Catherine Shaw. I have here a copy of the prenuptial agreement you drafted. Matteo had been so proud of that document. He had his lawyers make it ironclad. He wanted to ensure that his penniless wife couldn't touch a dime of his money if she ever got wise and tried to leave. That agreement, Catherine continued, which you signed, stipulates that all premarital assets and all assets derived from those assets remain the sole property of the original owner. You insisted on it. Exactly, Matteo crowed, seeing a lifeline. She gets nothing. It's all mine. You are correct, Catherine said. She gets nothing of yours, but by that same token, you get nothing of hers. She has nothing, Matteo screamed, his face purple. Arthur Harrison laughed, a genuine booming laugh that echoed in the stunned silence. Mr. Thorne, my daughter Ella Harrison, upon her 21st birthday, inherited a trust. That trust, which she has never touched, makes her the majority stakeholder in. Let's see. He tapped his chin mockingly. Ah, yes. Catherine supplied reading from a document. The Sterling Crest Group, which owns this hotel and 40 others worldwide. Meridian Trust, the financial institution that coincidentally holds the $80 million loan for your Thorn Tower project. And Apex Logistics, your sole supply chain partner for steel and glass. Matteo Thorn's entire body went numb. He swayed on his feet. You own everything, Mr. Thorn, Arthur finished for him. My daughter owns everything you've built your paper empire on. You haven't been building a business. You've been playing in my daughter's sandbox, using her toys. The room was silent. Jacob Hayes was staring, gobsmacked. Serafina was trying to sneak toward the exit, but the doors were now blocked by Harrison security. Matteo looked at Ella, his eyes wide with a new horrifying understanding. This wasn't a mouse. This was a lion. Ella, baby, he pleaded, taking a step toward her. You knew all this. Ella just looked at him, her expression unreadable. I need that shower, Dad. Mr. Albright, please have housekeeping send up a bottle of Veuve Clicquot, the 1998 La Grande Dame, and send the bill to my husband. She turned and walked out her father's jacket, trailing behind her like a royal cape. The doors clicked shut, leaving Matteo alone in the ballroom, surrounded by his guests, his father-in-law, and a team of lawyers who were just getting started. The silence that followed Ella's exit was heavier than lead. Matteo Thorn stood in the center of the ballroom, his tuxedo now looking like a cheap costume. He was breathing heavily, his mind frantically trying to find an exit, a loophole, a lie. This is a joke, he stammered, looking around at the investors he had been trying to impress. A misunderstanding. Arthur, Mr. Harrison, sir, she's your daughter. You can't let her do this. Arthur Harrison walked slowly toward him, his hands clasped behind his back. He was no longer angry. He was disappointed. Let her, Arthur said. Mr. Thorn, you seem to be under the impression that I am doing this. This is all Ella's doing. She's been, how do you say, managing her portfolio for the last 18 months. Matteo's blood turned to ice. What does that mean? It means, Catherine Shaw, the lawyer, said, as she stepped forward, that for the last 18 months, Thorn Industries has been under a quiet private audit, an audit conducted by its primary creditor and majority stakeholder, an audit conducted by your wife. Twist. Matteo's mind reeled. The late nights Ella spent in the study, which he assumed were for her silly online book clubs, the random questions she'd ask about his business. Oh, Matteo. I'm just curious, who is it we use for our steel imports? The mistakes his accounting department had made, which she had helpfully pointed out. She wasn't being a curious wife. She was building a case. You, he stammered, pointing a shaking finger at Arthur. You put her up to this. You set me up. On the contrary, Arthur said, taking a file from Catherine. I advised her to divorce you 2 years ago, when you first forgot her birthday, to fly to Vegas with that woman. He motioned with his chin toward Serafina, who visibly flinched. Ella, Arthur continued, is the one who refused. She said, no, Dad. He's not just a bad husband. He's a criminal. He's using our leverage to defraud his investors. He's cooking the books. If I just divorce him, he'll run and he'll hurt other people. I'm not leaving until I have everything. Chloe Vance, the reporter, was now scribbling frantically in a notepad, her phone still recording. "Mr. Harrison, are you alleging criminal fraud?" "I'm not alleging anything," Arthur said calmly. "I'm stating facts. Catherine." Catherine Shaw put on a pair of reading glasses. "Mr. Thorne, on April the 10th, you filed a statement with Meridian Trust to secure your loan for the Thorne Tower project. In that statement, you claimed $300 million in secured assets from Thorne Industries. In reality, your company was $50 million in debt. That's bank fraud." She pulled another sheet. "On June 22nd, you told your secondary investors, many of whom are in this room," she gestured around and several people paled, "that you had secured permits from the city for the 90th floor. A miracle, you called it. In truth, you had bribed a city official. We have the bank transfers from an offshore account. That's bribery and wire fraud." She pulled a third sheet. "And Apex Logistics. You've been paying them. Or rather not paying them. You're 6 months in arrears, claiming cash flow issues, all while you were buying, let's see, a $4 million yacht in the Cayman Islands. A yacht you registered in Ms. Serafina Sterling's name." Serafina let out a small squeak. All eyes turned to her. She was trapped. This is privileged information," Matteo shrieked. You illegally—" "Illegally," Arthur cut in. "Mr. Thorne, my daughter is the 51% owner of Apex Logistics. She's the bank you're defrauding. It's not privileged information. It's accounts receivable. She's not a spy. She's the boss you've been stealing from." Jacob Hayes, the rival developer, actually clapped, slowly. "My God, Thorne. You didn't just marry above your station. You tried to build your entire career by embezzling from your own wife. You're not just a monster. You're an idiot." Matteo's carefully constructed world was not just a house of cards. It was a single card, and it was on fire. "Now," Arthur said, his voice dropping to a businesslike tone, "the humiliation of my daughter. That is a personal matter, and believe me, you will answer for it. But this," he gestured to the files, "this is business." Catherine Shaw stepped forward. "As of 9:05 p.m. this evening, Meridian Trust, citing the fraud and default clauses in your loan agreement, has issued a margin call for the full amount of your outstanding debt. That's $80 million. Due. Now." I don't have it," Matteo gasped. "We know," Catherine said flatly. "Therefore, the bank is exercising its right to seize your collateral, which is everything. Thorne Industries, your stocks, your properties, the penthouse you're living in, even the car you arrived in. And," Arthur added a cruel glint in his eye, "as the owner of this hotel, I am billing you for the full cost of this disaster of a party, including the security needed to remove you, the premium for the emotional distress caused to my staff, and—" He looked at the stain on the floor, a $5,000 cleaning fee for the 18th century Persian marble you defiled. This is, Matteo was hyperventilating. "This is called consequences." "Mr. Thorne," Arthur said. Chloe Vance, the reporter, stepped forward, her voice respectful. "Mr. Harrison, one question. Your daughter. Why did she hide who she was? Why let him treat her this way for so long?" Arthur looked toward the door. His daughter had exited. His expression was pained. "Because," he said, "she truly loved him once. She thought he was a good man who had lost his way. She kept hoping that Matteo would return. But tonight she realized Matteo was never there. There was only Thorn, a hollow man built of other people's money and other people's validation. He turned back to Matteo, his face hard. My daughter has a crippling flaw, Mr. Thorn. She has a good heart. She sees the best in people, even when it's not there. But you, tonight, you finally cured her of that. Arthur nodded to his security. He's all yours, Catherine. I'm going to check on my daughter. He walked out, not giving Matteo another look. Matteo was left alone with the lawyer. Now what? He whispered, his entire body shaking. Catherine Shaw snapped her briefcase shut. Now, Mr. Thorn, you're trespassing. The security team will escort you, and Miss Sterling, off the premises. I'd advise you to call a lawyer, though given that your accounts are frozen, you'll probably have to settle for a public defender. I'll sue you. He spat a final, pathetic act of defiance. I'll sue you all, I'll tell the world. Please do. Catherine smiled a wolf's smile. It's called discovery. We'd love to see what a full court-ordered audit of your life would find. I suspect what we have is just the tip of the iceberg. The security guards stepped forward. One took Matteo by the arm. The other took a terrified Serafina. You can't do this, Matteo yelled as he was dragged backward. I'm Matteo Thorn. I built. You built nothing, Jacob Hayes said, sipping his champagne. You just wrote checks on an account that wasn't yours. Good night, Thorn. The last thing Matteo saw was the ballroom full of his former peers, all watching him being dragged out of the Sterling Crest Grand, like common trash, the reporter's camera flashing in his face, documenting every second of his absolute and total ruin. While the ballroom descended into chaos, Ella was worlds away. The presidential suite at the Sterling Crest Grand wasn't just a hotel room. It was a 3-bedroom apartment in the sky permanently reserved for the Harrison family. It was, in fact, Ella's childhood home. She had taken her first steps on the hand-woven rug in the library and learned to play piano on the 1920s Steinway in the living room. When she entered soaked and shivering, Mr. Albright had already mobilized the staff. A warm plush robe was waiting. A fire was roaring in the marble fireplace. The dress, the ruined Dior, was whisked away by a maid not to be cleaned, but to be archived as evidence. Ella stood under the scalding water of the rain shower for 20 minutes, washing away the champagne, the scent of Matteo, and the last 3 years of her life. When she emerged wrapped in the robe, her father was waiting by the fire, a glass of the La Grande Dame champagne in his hand. I always hated him, Arthur said, handing her the glass. He didn't look at her. He just stared into the flames. I know, Dad, Ella said, taking a sip. The bubbles were sharp, cold, and clean. I built this entire company, this empire, he said, his voice thick with an emotion she rarely heard, for you. I built it so you would never ever be in a position where a man could treat you like that, so you would never have to depend on anyone. And I wasn't, Ella said softly. I never depended on him, Dad. That was the problem. He needed me to. She sat on the sofa opposite him. When I first met him, he was different. He was ambitious, yes, but he was funny. He was charming. He seemed driven. I thought he was a self-made man. I admired that. I was tired of the trust fund boys you kept trying to set me up with. I just wanted you to be safe, Arthur murmured. I know, but I wanted to be seen. Ella said the truth, finally coming out. I wanted someone to love Ella the bookworm, not Ella Harrison the heiress. So I downplayed it. I told him my family was respectable, but had lost its fortune generations ago. I let him believe I was impressed by his money. And he believed it, Arthur said, a note of disgust in his voice. Because to a man like Matteo Thorne, wealth is the only thing that is impressive. The idea that someone wouldn't use that kind of power was alien to him. Exactly, Ella agreed. And for a while it was fine. But then he got more successful. And the more successful he got, the more insecure he became. He needed to be the big man. He needed me to be less so he could feel more. The humiliation. It started small. Jokes at dinner parties. Forgetting his wallet. Making me ask him for money even though he was using my lines of credit. I saw it. Arthur said, his fist clenching. Thomas the doorman. He keeps a log. Mr. Albright. His reports to the board were detailed. They've been watching you, Ella. My entire staff. They were just waiting for your signal. I couldn't, Ella said, a tear rolling down her cheek. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. I was the richest woman in New York, and I was being financially abused by a con artist I'd let into my life. And then I found out about the fraud. She stood up, walking to the window. The city glittered below a kingdom she had forgotten she owned. I found the offshore accounts, the bribes, the fake invoices. He wasn't just a bad husband, Dad. He was using Harrison assets to build a criminal enterprise. If he went down, he could have exposed us, our banks, everything. He was a liability. So you became an auditor, Arthur said, a grim pride in his voice. I became a necessary evil, Ella corrected. I gathered every email, every transfer, every lie. I fed it all to Catherine. Tonight was supposed to be his last party. I was going to serve him with divorce papers and the audit findings in the morning. But he couldn't help himself, could he? Arthur said. He had to have his show. He had to humiliate me, Ella said, touching her shoulder where the dress had ripped. He had to prove to Serafina and Jacob Hayes and the whole world that he was the master. A phone buzzed on the side table. It was Catherine Shaw. Arthur put it on speaker. It's done, Arthur, Catherine said, her voice crisp. Thorne and the mistress are on the sidewalk. His assets are frozen. The WSJ reporter Chloe Vance has the whole story, plus the fraud documentation I accidentally left on the table. The story will break online in an hour. By morning, Thorne Industries will be worthless. And Matteo? Ella asked, her voice cold. Crying last I saw, trying to get a cab. His Amex was declined. Good, Ella said. Catherine, the yacht, the one in Serafina's name. Seized by the bank as a fraudulent transfer of assets, ma'am, Catherine replied. Excellent. And, Catherine, yes, Ms. Harrison. Make sure the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York gets a copy of that fraud file, anonymously, of course. I've endured his humiliation. I don't see why the federal prison system shouldn't have a turn. There was a pause on the line, and Ella could almost hear Catherine's sharp, appreciative smile. Consider it done, Miss Harrison. Welcome back. The line clicked off. Ella and her father sat in silence for a moment. The fire crackled. The battle was over. So, Arthur said, gesturing to the suite. You'll be staying here, I assume. For a while, Ella said. I need to breathe. And I need to get to work. Work. Thorne Tower. Ella said, a new spark in her eye. Meridian Trust is about to foreclose on a half-built skyscraper. It's a massive asset, but a toxic project. The city will hate it. The investors are wiped out. We'll have to sell it for parts, Arthur mused. No, Ella said. I'm going to take it over. I'm going to finish it. But it's not going to be Thorn Tower. It's not going to be luxury condos for billionaires. It's going to be the Harrison Hope Center, a mixed-use building, subsidized housing for domestic violence survivors on the upper floors, free legal aid services on the concourse, and a trade school for women re-entering the workforce. We'll fund it by selling the other penthouse, the one he bought. Arthur Harrison stared at his daughter. The mousy, quiet bookworm was gone. In her place was a CEO, a matriarch, a Harrison. He smiled a real proud smile. That, Ella, is a brilliant idea, but it's a hell of a project. Are you ready for the... Ella drained her champagne glass. Dad, after the last 3 years, running a construction project will be a vacation. The sun rose over Manhattan, but for Matteo Thorne, it was the dawn of a new bleak reality. He had spent the night on a bench in Central Park. After being thrown out of the Sterling Crest, his mistress, Serafina, had tried to call a Rolls-Royce car service only to have her own cards declined. She had shrieked at Matteo, blaming him for her public humiliation and the loss of her fake watch and real yacht. She had slapped him hard across the face and then flagged down a yellow cab, leaving him on the curb. His phone was dead. He had no cash. The doorman at his own penthouse, a building he technically didn't own anymore, had refused him entry, citing orders from the new management, Harrison Holdings. He was for the first time in his adult life completely and utterly powerless. When the sun came up, he staggered to a newsstand. His face was on the front page of every paper. The thorn-shattered tech mogul's empire revealed as house of cards built on wife's fortune. The Wall Street Journal from trophy wife to tycoon. Ella Harrison, secret heiress, exposes husband's massive fraud. The New York Times, Millionaire, mogul's mistress, gets the boot and a fake watch. The New York Post. It was a media firestorm. Chloe Vance's article was devastating. It included not just the details of the party, but the specifics of the fraud, the bank statements, the bribes. It painted a portrait of Matteo as not just a criminal, but a fool, a man who had humiliated the one person who controlled his entire universe. He crumpled the paper. He was ruined. He was a laughingstock. He saw a payphone, a relic from another era, and used the last of his change to make one call. The only person he could think of. His lawyer. Barry, it's Matteo You've seen the news. You have to help me. That bitch, she's taken everything. There was a long, tired sigh on the other end of the line. Matteo, I've got 3 FBI agents in my lobby right now. The U.S. Attorney's Office just unsealed a 42-count indictment against you. Bank fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy. Matteo, they have everything. Tapes, emails, bank transfers. It was her, Matteo screamed into the receiver. It was Ella. She framed me. She entrapped me. Matteo, she owned the bank you were defrauding. You entrapped yourself. Listen to me. I can't represent you. Harrison Holdings is a client of my firm's parent company. It's a massive conflict of interest. Frankly, everyone in this town has a conflict of interest. The Harrisons own half of it. So what do I do? Matteo pleaded. My advice, turn yourself in, Matteo. It's over. Get a public defender. And whatever you do not try to contact your wife. The line clicked. Matteo Thorne dropped the receiver. It swung on its metal cord, hitting the side of the booth with a dull, final thud. 24 hours later. Ella Harrison Thorne, she had already legally reclaimed her maiden name, walked into the main boardroom of Harrison Holdings. It was a cavernous room on the 80th floor of the Harrison Tower, a building that, unlike Thorne's, was owned outright and bore the family name discreetly in small brass letters by the door. The entire executive board was assembled. Her father, Arthur Harrison, sat at the head of the table. Ella was not wearing Dior. She was wearing a simple, sharp, dark blue pantsuit. Her hair was pulled back. The heavy, gaudy Thorne diamonds were gone, replaced by simple pearl earrings. She looked in short like her father's daughter. "Ella, you're late," Arthur said, though his eyes were smiling. "Sorry, Dad," Ella said, taking the empty seat beside him. "I was on a call with the U.S. attorney. They've located Mr. Thorne. He was trying to buy a bus ticket to Mexico with a credit card he'd stolen from Serafina." A few of the board members chuckled. "He's in custody," Ella finished. "He'll be arraigned tomorrow. He faces significant time." "A fitting end," Arthur said, then clapped his hands. "All right, let's get to business. Ella, the floor is yours. You've all read her proposal for the Thorne asset." An older board member, a man named General Peterson, retired, cleared his throat. "Ms. Harrison, Ella, a noble project. Truly, a shelter housing admirable. But it's a black hole. That project is billions over budget. The zoning is a mess. We'd be better off bulldozing it and taking the loss." "A loss is not in my vocabulary." "General," Ella said, her voice filling the room. She stood and walked to the digital display. "You're right. It is a mess. Thorne's original plan was absurd, gaudy, and structurally unsound. But the foundation is solid. The steel from our Apex Logistics is the best in the world. Thorne's vision was the problem." She clicked a button. A new architectural rendering appeared on the screen. It was still a tower, but it was beautiful. It was sleek, integrated with green spaces, and looked less like a monument to ego and more like a part of the city. "This is the Harrison Hope Center. We are not bulldozing. We are repurposing. We've already spoken to the new city council president, who is thrilled to replace Thorne's folly with this. She's agreed to fast-track all new permits in exchange for 500 units of dedicated affordable housing." "That's half the building," another board member protested. "It is," Ella agreed. "The other half," she clicked again, "will be the new North American headquarters for Sterling Crest Global. We're moving out of this building. It's old. It's inefficient. This new tower will be the most advanced green-certified building on the continent. The tax incentives alone will pay for the retrofit." She looked around the room. They were listening. They were really listening. "The shelter and the legal aid," she continued, "will be run by the Harrison Foundation, our non-profit arm. It's a tax write-off, and the public relations value is immeasurable. We are not just cleaning up Matteo's mess. We are turning his monument to greed into a testament to Harrison values. We are turning a liability into our new flagship." She looked at Jacob Hayes, the rival developer whom she had invited to the meeting. Mr. Hayes was one of the few men in that room who saw Thorne for what he was, Ella said. "He also happens to run the most efficient construction firm in the state. He's agreed to oversee the project for a very favorable rate in exchange for an exclusive partnership with Harrison Holdings on our new South American expansion." Jacob nodded. "She's a tough negotiator, gentlemen, but she's a smart one. Her plan is solid. It will work, and it will be profitable within 5 years. Ella looked at her father. Arthur Harrison was leaning back, his arms crossed. He had a look of such profound pride on his face that Ella almost faltered. "Well," Arthur said to the board, "I believe my daughter has answered all your questions, all in favor of the Harrison Hope Center proposal under the full direction of the new acting CEO of Harrison Urban Development, Ms. Ella Harrison." Every hand in the room went up. Ella took a deep breath. It was done. 1 year later, the city skyline had changed. The Harrison Hope Center was nearly complete. It was a beacon, its green terraces climbing into the sky. Ella stood on the unfinished roof, a hard hat on her head, looking out over the city. Her city. The past year had been a whirlwind. Matteo Thorne had been found guilty on 28 of the 42 counts. He had been sentenced to 30 years in a federal penitentiary. During his sentencing, he had delivered a rambling, bitter speech blaming Ella, her father, the judge, and his incompetent public defender. Ella hadn't attended. She was too busy. Serafina Sterling, after being sued by the Harrison-owned bank for the return of the yacht and several $1 million in gifts, had declared bankruptcy. She was last seen, according to the Post, working at a perfume counter in a suburban mall. Chloe Vance's article had won a journalism award. Her new book, The Lion's Share, How Ella Harrison Took Back Her Kingdom, was a national bestseller. Ella's phone buzzed. It was Thomas the doorman from the Sterling Crest Grand. He was now the head of security for the New Hope Center. "Ma'am," Thomas said, his voice warm. "Your 10 o'clock is here. The first family for the housing lottery." "Send them up, Thomas," Ella said, smiling. "I want to greet them myself." She took off her hard hat as a young woman, and her 2 small children stepped onto the roof. The woman looked terrified, overwhelmed by the height and the newness. "Welcome," Ella said, shaking her hand. "I'm Ella. I'm so glad you're here." "Ms. Harrison," the woman whispered, tears in her eyes. I can't believe it. After what we've been through. To have a home." "This is your home," Ella said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "It's safe. And," she pointed to the lower floors, "we have the best free lawyers in New York. You're not alone anymore." As she watched the family look out over their new life, Ella finally understood. Her father hadn't built his empire for her. He had built it to protect her. And for 3 years, she had allowed a man to make her feel small, powerless, and trapped, all while she held the keys to the kingdom. She had endured the humiliation. She had survived the fire. But she hadn't just escaped. She had taken the ashes of her husband's cruelty and built a monument to hope. Matteo had called her a charity case. He was right. She was. But she wasn't the one receiving the charity. She was the one giving it. He had tried to play chess with a queen, not realizing she owned the entire board. She looked out at the skyline, took a deep, clean breath of air, and got back to work. And so, Ella. Harrison reclaimed her name, her power, and her purpose. She proved that the loudest voice in the room is often the weakest, and that true strength doesn't come from a bank account, but from integrity. Matteo Thorne thought he could destroy her, but he only succeeded in reminding her who she truly was. Not a victim, not a trophy, but a queen. What did you think of Ella's incredible story of justice? Have you ever seen someone so arrogant get exactly what they deserved? We see these stories in headlines, but the real-life drama is always more powerful. If you were moved by Ella's journey, please smash that like button. It tells us you want more stories of justice and empowerment, just like this one. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. And most importantly, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss another story. Thank you for watching.